Nature is an amazing thing, and one of those wonders is albinism. Albinism is a rare genetic disorder where you aren't born with the usual amount of melanin pigment. This can occur in animals and plants. Let's start by examining the impact of albinism in humans, including the human rights issues that have historically and currently plagued individuals with this rare condition.
Persecution of people with albinism, sometimes abbreviated PWA, is based on the belief that certain body parts of albinistic people can transmit magical powers. Such superstition is present especially in some parts of the African Great Lakes region. It has been promulgated and exploited by witch doctors and others who use such body parts as ingredients in rituals, concoctions and potions with the claim that their magic will bring prosperity to the user, muti or medicine murder. As a result, people with albinism have been persecuted, killed and dismembered, and graves of albinos dug up and desecrated. At the same time, people with albinism have also been ostracized and even killed for exactly the opposite reason, because they are presumed to be cursed and bring bad luck. The persecutions of people with albinism take place mostly in sub-Saharan African communities, especially among East Africans. Albinism is a genetically inherited condition which is very rare and, worldwide, affects approximately 1 in 20,000 people. Although rare in the Western world, albinism is quite common in sub-Saharan Africa, likely as a result of consanguinity. Both parents, who may or may not be albinos themselves, must carry the gene if it is to be passed on to the child. Albinism occurs in both males and females and is not specific to any race or ethnic group. Statistics show that 50% of albinistic people in Tanzania have a known albinistic relative, although very few understand or are educated about the medical and genetic causes of this condition. Many believe it is a punishment from God or bad luck, and that their disease could be contagious, which is often the view of even members of the medical and professional community. These misconceptions, coupled with the lack of education, are some of the key reasons that albinism is so heavily persecuted. This lack of knowledge about people with albinism means that folk tales and superstition in the name of witchcraft take the place of medical and scientific facts in the minds of many native Africans, with and without albinism, which in turn has major effects on the social integration of albinistic people into African society. 98% of albinos die by the age of 40 for reasons which could easily be prevented. A report was released on 1 April 2014 by the Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, office of the Canadian charity Under the Same Sun. Titled Reported Attacks of Persons with Albinism, the document reviews 180 countries and lists 129 recent killings and 181 other attacks, all within 23 African countries. These attacks include mutilation, violence, violation of graves, and cases of asylum seeking. In Tanzania, albinos represent 1 in every 1429 births, a much higher rate than in any other nation. According to Al-Shai Maa Gir, an albino member of parliament, there are 6,977 officially registered albinos in Tanzania. However, it is believed that there may be up to 17,000 undocumented. A number of albinos have migrated to the Dar es Salaam area, as they feel safer in an urban setting. Tanzania is thought to have the largest population of albinos in Africa. Albinos are especially persecuted in Shinyanga and Mwanza, where witch doctors have promoted a belief in the potential magical and superstitious properties of albinos' body parts. There are further issues which arise when there is lack of education about albinism. Fathers often suspect the mother of the albino child of infidelity with a white man or that the child is the ghost of a European colonist. This can cause immense strain on families and relationships. An albino child is often seen as a bad omen and treated as unwanted. Many albino babies become victims of infanticide due to these superstitious views. After 2015, when Tanzania enacted tougher steps against violence against albinos, Malawi has seen a steep upsurge in killings, with 18 reported killings since November 2014, and the likely toll being higher because of missing persons and unreported murders. President Peter Mutharika has formed a committee to study the situation. Additionally, Malawi has faced an immense amount of graves belonging to albino people being robbed in more recent history. In 2017, police found at least 39 cases of illegal removals of the bodies of albino people from their graves or having body parts removed from their corpses.
Human beings have 2 copies of every gene. We inherit 1 copy from our mother and 1 from our father. We all carry between 6 to 7 recessive, non-working genes, but we are healthy because the other copy of the gene compensates. This only becomes a problem where partners carry copies of the same non-working gene. If both parents carry the same non-working gene and both pass on the non-working copy to a child, the child will have no working gene to compensate. In this case, the child will be affected by an autosomal recessive disorder. In this example, Anne and John are perfectly healthy, but each carries a copy of the same non-working gene. Both are healthy because the normal working copy of the gene compensates. However, when it comes to having children, if Anne and John both pass a copy of this non-working gene onto a child, the child will inherit 2 non-working copies of the gene. As they will have no normal working copy to compensate, the child will be affected by the disorder. The risk of this happening to every pregnancy to this couple is 1 in 4. If Anne passed on the non-working gene and John the normal working gene copy, then the child will be a healthy carrier, just like its parents. The opposite could also happen, with John passing on the non-working gene and Anne the normal working copy, and again the baby would be healthy. If Anne and John both pass on the working copy of the gene, the child will be healthy and won't even be a carrier. So as you can see, parents who are both carriers of the same recessive gene have a 3 in 4 chance of having a healthy child with each pregnancy. We tend to see higher rates of recessive genetic disorders amongst children from relationships where the parents are related. This is known as consanguinity. It is much more likely to occur in the case of cousins due to shared grandparents. This is why genetic disorders tend to occur more frequently in marriages between cousins.
In the United States, about 1 in every 18 to 20,000 people has some type of albinism.
At the turn of the 20th century, the travelling circus was probably the most exciting and popular form of public entertainment. The magnetic attraction of the big top was so strong that it gave rise to the expression running away with the circus. However, in the case of 2 albino African American brothers at that time, the circus ran away with them. During the height of circus popularity, determined bounty hunters scoured America's backwoods and the world, seeking out people they could transform into sideshow attractions. The showmen took out ads in newspapers and trade publications, appealing for freak hunters, as they were called. Then aged 6 and 9 years old, George and Willie Muse were the eldest of 5 children who lived with their mother Harriet Muse in the small community of Truevine on the outskirts of Roanoke, Virginia. Against virtually impossible odds, both boys were born with albinism, which rendered their skin extremely vulnerable to the harsh Virginia sun. In addition, both also bore a condition called nystagmus, which often occurs with albinism and weakens vision. The boys had started squinting in response to light from such a young age that, even as children, they had developed permanent furrows in their foreheads. Willie Muse was later to describe Shelton as a dirty, rotten scumbag who displayed a huge indifference towards the brothers on a personal level. The boys were not even allowed to go to school or learn to read. Shelton actually knew so little about them that when he handed the Muse brothers a banjo, saxophone and ukulele as photo props, he was shocked to realise that they could not only play all of the instruments, but that Willie was able to replicate any song after hearing it just once. The Muse brothers' musical talents brought them even more popularity, and in cities across the country their fame grew. Soon, Shelton was to strike a deal with circus owner L.G. Barnes to install the brothers as a sideshow in an agreement that rendered the young men modern-day slaves hidden in plain sight. The way Barnes saw it was that he made the boys a paying proposition, whereby they could bring in as much as $32,000 a day, but were paid barely enough to survive on. Behind the curtain, the youth would be crying out for their family, only to be told to be quiet as their mother was deceased and there was no use even asking about her. In 1922, Shelton transferred the Muse brothers to the Ringling Brothers Circus, attracted by a more lucrative deal. He shaped their blonde hair into sculptural locks that emerged dramatically from the tops of their heads and dressed them in colourful, unusual garments, claiming the men had been found in the wreckage of a spaceship in the Mojave Desert. Meanwhile, Harriet Muse had exhausted every resource trying to locate her sons, but local prejudice was so rife that no law enforcement official took her seriously. Even the Humane Society of Virginia disregarded her pleas for help. She still had another son and 2 daughters to care for, and eventually moved into Roanoke for better pay as a maid. However, over those years, neither she nor her missing sons lost faith in their belief that they would be reunited. In 1927, when Harriet Muse heard that the circus was in town, she claimed to see in a dream that her sons were in Roanoke. On October 14th of that year, George and Willie Muse, now in their mid-30s, arrived back in their childhood township for the first time in 13 years. By that stage, the circus was a vast affair with 4 locomotives, 100 rail cars, and employing 1,600 workers. Performances took place over 5 rings and 6 stages, featuring elephants and high-wire acts. As George and Willie Muse began playing the crowd pleaser "It's a Long Way to Tipperary," a popular song during World War I, George spotted a familiar face at the back of the audience. He turned to his brother Willie and said, "There's our dear old mother. Look, she is not dead." After 13 years of separation, the brothers dropped their instruments and joyously embraced their mother. Shelton soon caused a stir at his show's interruption and told Harriet that the brothers were his property. She insisted that she wasn't leaving without her sons, and to the police, who arrived soon after, explained that she'd allowed her sons to be taken for a few months on the condition that they were returned. Instead, they'd been held indefinitely, seemingly by Shelton. Fortunately, the police were sympathetic and agreed that the brothers were free to go. However, Candy Shelton was not to give up so easily. Ringling sued the Muse family, claiming that they had deprived the circus of 2 lucrative earners bound by legally binding contracts. Harriet Muse enlisted the help of a local lawyer and won a series of lawsuits which confirmed her son's right to back wages and visits home during the off-season.
I've noticed in my work is that in a culture where the dominant racial group is dark-skinned, obviously the child with albinism stands out more. There's more of a visible contrast immediately. Having said that, in my experience, people clearly knew I was different. I got the comment albino, ghost, whitey, Snow White. So people knew in my culture, but yes, whenever you have a culture where there's a lack of general education, people have a low education level, lack of medical resources to understand that it's a medical condition, then all of the cultural myths and all of the stigma kind of take over, and they end up informing what people think. So yeah, you throw that all in with that level of misinformation, and then when you throw it into traditional witchcraft practices, as we have in a number of African countries, the challenges can become fatal. And so the issue is that there's a global level of misinformation about this genetic condition. Like when I talk to somebody in Canada, the United States, or Europe, or India, or Africa, none of them know, for example, that a person with albinism has a visual impairment. They know that you're white-skinned. That's about the level of knowledge most people have.
In the national levels, there is an absence of laws on albinism specifically. In the international law level, there's an absence of legal instruments dealing with albinism specifically. So there's nothing legally in the whole world, as far as we know, that deals with albinism specifically. Now, there's things that deal with albinism indirectly, aspects of albinism, like the visual issue. I'm a person who is legally blind, so I can be considered as someone who faces disability. And now we're also exploring the chances that I am facing a type of racism called colorism, not just me, but people with albinism even outside of races that are dark. So there's all this indirect legal mechanism that would apply to aspects of albinism. It will be very mosaic in the way it applies. So hopefully either this mosaic will lead to some kind of comprehensive protection in the end, or a specific law will be enacted both nationally and internationally to cover albinism.
Plants with albinism occurs when the production of chlorophyll is interrupted due to a mutation. This condition is fatal because plants that do not have chlorophyll are unable to store or produce energy from sunlight, known as photosynthesis. Once the initial stored energy in the plant is used, the plant will die.
These are the first sproutings of the Indian pipes, or ghost pipes. They're called ghost pipes. They don't have any chlorophyll, and they use the trees around them to get nutrients, and they provide nutrients to the trees. They're very interesting little, symbiotic parasites. Very interesting plant, but I don't know if someone stepped on them or they're just sprouting, and this is what happens normally. It's the first time I've ever seen them in the ground, or right close to the ground. Oh well, they're pretty cool plants. They possess no chlorophyll, but they're pretty cool. What's next?
We just learned how albinism presents itself in plants. Now let's look at how this condition presents itself in various animals. Let's start off looking at the screech owl. How about the ferocious tiger? Bet you don't want to meet this skunk on the street and pet him. The snake, I think we all run from those, irrespective of color. How about the echidna, or anteater? Hummingbird. The zebra. What about frogs? Still scare me. They don't have to be green. The kiwi. Yeah, this is a flightless bird. The moose, and that's her mom. Just fascinating. What about squirrels? There are actually black squirrels as well. The crow. The hedgehog. Chimpanzee. Humpback whale. Alligators. The deer and her fawn. The sparrow. Penguin. The camel and its mother. Raccoon. The lion. The peacock. This is the showstopper. Absolutely fabulous. Kangaroo. Elephant, my personal favorite. Koala. The bat. And sea turtle. Let's learn more about these sea turtles.
¿No sabías?
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Michelle, generally these turtles appear mutilated, cutted. So what Gonzalo said is that nature is very wisdom, because these turtles have a very difficult organs, and this is why they don't last more than 1 year alive. So after 1 year, they die, and they don't have the capability to reproduce themselves. So this is why he believes nature has a lot of wisdom in this point.
Now, when I was doing research, tell them some people sell these turtles. Why? Is that legal to sell them on the internet?
Ahí debe haber, o sea, hay que especificar bien si se trata de tortugas terrestres o tortugas marinas. Las que tenemos nosotros son marinas, y que en una revisión que hemos hecho en internet, donde único ha habido tortugas marinas albinas es una en México y otra de otra especie en Brasil. No hay posibilidad de hacer ningún tipo de comercialización porque son casos muy raros que puedan sobrevivir.
Okay, there shouldn't be. Probably on internet there should be specified if this is about the selling is about earth turtles or sea turtles. In this case, this sea turtles is very weird to find them. So there was one in Mexico, and there was another one, Albanian turtle, in Brazil. It was different turtle. So there is not a chance to sell them or to do e-commerce of this kind of turtles, because there are not so many.
Okay. So now I understand. So what's the penalty? You have a sanctuary. So what's the penalty for someone that takes one of these turtles?
Okay, so about the penalties, in Cuba, there is no difference about the earth turtles or the sea turtles. So in both cases, they shouldn't be taken. And yes, they have penalty. The law says that there is a total prohibition with this, permanent. But not mentioning the amount, just that the penalty exists.
In the U.S., there are also sanctions for sea turtles. You know, we certainly see land turtles for sale, but for these protected classes and species, we are seeing the U.S. Justice Department step in and arrest people and sentence them to prison time. Okay, so when you rescue these turtles, when they have hatchlings there, how many do you keep in the sanctuary versus how many do you release back into their natural habitat?
Este caso que tenemos ahora, mantenemos 5 tortugas que tienen en este momento 3 años, ha sido un caso insólito porque han nacido 18, 3 murieron al momento y paulatinamente durante todo este transcurso de los 3 años han muerto y han quedado solo 5. Nosotros no vamos a liberar esa tortuga porque sería muy vulnerable en el medio natural. Enseguida los depredadores la matarían por su color.
Okay. So, no. So far, these Albion turtles are very rare cases to find them. It's not that we find them every day. So, well, the 5 turtles we have in here, the ones we talk about, they have 3 years old. In the beginning, they were 18. 3 of them passed away when they just got born. And the rest of them have been passed away during these last 3 years. So now we have the 5 Albion turtles in here, and we don't plan at all to liberate them, because if we liberate them, the predators will kill them, mostly because of their color.
You know what? This is amazing. I'm going to share it with the world. I think that your mission is incredible. And Gonzalo, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing this amazing, amazing passion and mission with me and our listening audience so that they too can go out and do the research just like I did and find out just how fascinating this is.
Puedo decirle que esto es un lugar turístico, que a la audiencia que ella tiene, que pueden invitar a que vengan entre los meses de junio y agosto a disfrutar de estas actividades de conservación que hacemos con las tortugas aquí. Nosotros siempre vinculamos a los clientes que vienen. Incluso hay clientes que repiten y vienen a integrarse a nuestro trabajo de conservación con las tortugas marinas en este lugar.
Okay, I also want to mention that this is a touristic place, so I also want to invite to the audience to come to visit this side of the country. The best months to come are from June to August. These are the best season to come to enjoy about also these reserved turtles. We have some tourist people that came not only once but twice, and some of them are even cooperating with these research centers.
Researchers estimate that more than 1.1 million sea turtles have been illegally killed and in some cases trafficked between 1990 and 2020. Despite many laws against the black market wildlife trade, it is considered to be one of the most lucrative illicit industries in the world. Thank you. So I'm going to say sign off to Peru and Cuba. Thank you both so much for coming on Tab Talks.
Okay, a pleasure. Muchas gracias por estar aquí en Tab Talks.
You're welcome.